So how did I get into anime? So as a gay man, I think I've always identified more with the straight cis women in media, you know, just because growing up there was such a lack of representation with gay men and gay men of color, and especially gay Asian men. And so that's probably how I got into Sailor Moon specifically. Sailor Moon was the first anime that I've ever watched. And, you know, I'm sure that that show was designed to be marketed towards young girls, but there are definitely a huge community of queer men who also love Sailor Moon. I think that was one of my first like experiences with animation, besides My Neighbor Totoro, which was also like totally different from Sailor Moon, but also extremely artistic, and it was one of those movies where like you could still enjoy as a kid, but like you really wasn't sure like what kind of meaning to derive from it, just because all of these shows are just so very large in scale. I think I liked animation because it felt different. It felt different from the Power Rangers show. I mean, the Power Rangers concept is from Japan as well, I believe. The casts were kind of diverse, but it was always like the straight white guy that was always the leader and the Red Ranger. Anime was probably one of the best ways for me to feel at least somewhat represented as an Asian American, not as a Taiwanese or Cantonese Chinese person, but just as an Asian person. I would like to think that I could tell that these people were not supposed to look white, because in the environments that they live in, the references to culture that were made in the shows, you know, because you know, those shows were specifically designed to appeal to a Japanese audience. Even though the dubs, you know, like Pokemon and Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball tried to hide like some of the Japanese references to it, like of course they're still there. Like you would lose a lot of the heart of the show if you tried to get rid of all of it. Like you can't animate out a rice ball. You can't animate out like, you know, the cute Japanese designs that are on here. I'll show you it. Traditional Japanese designs like this every now and then. You see, you know, yukata and kimonos sometimes, and you see kanji. I think the biggest case of like reanimation that I've seen is in Yu-Gi-Oh! Maybe, where, you know, they give the Harpy Lady like a slightly less revealing clothes, because like it was literally just like two strips like that covered her areolas. But that was the most drastic change that I've seen. You know, and also calling rice balls cookies. Even though I'm sure it could be argued that back when I was younger, diversity actually was like a little bit more of a value thing. You know, you would see, you know, all these kid shows and there would at least be like one or two Asian people in there somewhere. In Captain Planet and Magic School Bus, like the cast were actually pretty diverse, which I appreciated. To be totally honest, I think it was just that anime is actually just leaps and bounds ahead of what animation was in America. I don't know if it was just like budgeting issues and because Americans weren't sure if animation was like gonna be like a thing. I hope this isn't stereotyping and speaking for the Japanese community, but from what I understand, like Japanese has always been ahead of the curve in terms of storytelling, just making really cool and different art, and especially animation. Like you look at the quality of something from the 90s that's from Japan, and you see something from the 90s that's from America, and I feel like the Japanese anime holds up a lot better than something like Captain Planet or the Magic School Bus. I still love those shows, but I think they just developed anime a lot faster and better than Americans have. I think Hollywood values the performance of these series, but they don't have enough people that like anime to really understand and examine like what people actually like about these animes, because otherwise they wouldn't have done such a crappy job at all of these movies. To do a Dragon Ball Z movie, I know it's horrible. To do an Avatar movie, to do Ghost in the Shell. The same goes for, you know, like Resident Evil and Dead or Alive movies. And also, like, it's not just direct adaptation movies, it's a lot of animes have inspired American films, which it's kind of disheartening to me though that a lot of people don't understand that a lot of these films that are lauded as brilliant and original are actually inspired by anime. Obviously, there's still a stigma that watching anime makes you a weeb. It makes you like this super nerdy, like not socially apt person. I mean, that's true for me, but it's not everybody. You know, Ghost in the Shell inspired the Matrix series. A lot of people, everybody knows the Matrix, but not everybody knows Ghost in the Shell. Someone bought the movie Perfect Blue in order to recreate that scene in Requiem for a Dream. Requiem for a Dream, Requiem for the Soul. I haven't watched that movie. People also saw a lot of parallels between Perfect Blue and Black Swan. If people think that The Matrix and Black Swan were so brilliant, then they should watch what inspired those things, because it was probably equally or even more brilliant. I just think that they're in an environment where apparently that they're allowed to be a little bit more artistic and be a little bit more challenging with things. I mean, granted, there's like a crap ton of like really crappy anime out there that's just meant to appeal to like the lowest common denominator. I'm definitely not denying that. But I think for me, it's just statistically more easy to find something brilliant when I go on Crunchyroll than it is when I go to the ArcLight when I go to the movie theater. This is not sponsored by Crunchyroll, by the way. I wish it was though. Maybe it's just this idea of not speaking down to children or your younger demographic. Even in something as like supposedly light and fluffy as Sailor Moon, like you see like really dark moments of it. You see a lot of grotesque monsters in there. You see Sailor Moon has a lot of really dark moments to it, especially if you watch the undubbed version. It's kind of like video games where, you know, people from the outside would think that like, oh, it's just like a bunch of like boobies and Dead or Alive volleyball and a lot of like, you know, gun shooting and GTA and involves violence and things. And people might imagine that anime is also, you know, like a lot of boobies and a lot of nudity. Games, manga, and anime are progressing towards that point of actually being held up as like a beautiful art form that has the potential to rock the way that we see art. Not quite there yet, but I do feel like we've been making a lot of progress. I know for a fact that there are some anime fans out there, and please let me know if you have any recommendations for me. I will definitely take them to heart and make note of them. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. I love you and I really appreciate you. Today's foundation is, let's make it general and do the ACLU. They've been doing amazing work fighting the travel ban. I'm gonna try my best to make the next 2 videos of the next 2 weeks entertaining, but I apologize in advance if they're not because I'm gonna be on vacation for 2 weeks. Cool, that's all I got to say. Bye!